Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 29 of the Avocado Gamescast, the Avocado's very own super duper one of a kind gaming podcast. We have a very special podcast lined up for you today because our main topic of discussion isn't video games. I know, right? Right? Instead of talking about video games themselves, we're going to talk about the depiction of video games in other media, like books, movies, and television, that kind of stuff. But before we get to that, let's do introductions. My name's Merve, and joining me, we have Waluigi's number one fan, Wolfman Jew.
Wah.
Wah indeed. Next, we have New York's most famous autumnal confection, SewerRatPumpkinPie.
Are we doing puns today? Because I could be your new favorite fall guy.
That would be great. I didn't think of that. And finally, the man who thinks a bungee jump is something you do in Destiny, the Kappa.
Hey, what's up, guys? Oh, you're going to hear some Destiny stuff today, too. Better be ready.
Yeah, it's going to be... at some point, we're going to do like a Destiny podcast, too.
I can't wait.
It's going to be weird, because I have never played a second of Destiny, and I've seen all of like 5 minutes of gameplay. So it'd be kind of like learning a new language.
I mean,
At least I've seen more gameplay.
I mean, it won't be that different from when you, I, Operetta, and Lord Stoneheart did the all Pokemon Sun and Moon podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually played, like, I'd say 10 hours of Pokemon Blue, and I've watched the anime, so I'm at least familiar with the property. I know jack shit about Destiny. Other than that, I had a Dinklebot for a while.
Yes, that's 90% of what I know, other than raids.
Raids, yeah, and apparently there's something called a light level. I don't know. I'll look it up. I'll give myself a big primer on Destiny. So Kappa, I hear it's your birthday today.
It is.
Happy birthday.
Thanks.
Or should I say, Cappy birthday? Get it?
Oh,
'Cause your name's Kappa.
Grown.
And speaking of Cappy, let's talk about Super Mario Odyssey.
I feel like we're probably going to go into this as a bit of more of maybe an argument than normal, because I know you've been having some issues with it, while it might be my favorite game of the year.
Yeah, I actually just finished it last night. By the way, I think I just did an amazing segue, and I think it deserves to be acknowledged. Anyway, as far as Super Mario Odyssey goes, yeah, I finished it last night. Overall, it's a game that I liked. I think I had some issues with the controls, and I don't know if it's nearly as inventive as something like Super Mario 64, but I enjoyed my time with it, and I think it's a good game. There's a good chance to winning a top 10 for the year. And, if you're in the market for a Switch, I'd recommend it. I haven't really gotten much into the end game content, though. I've only, I just beat it and then tooled around for an hour. So I don't really know much about the surprise that come afterwards. So we're going to try to keep this spoiler light.
Yeah, to be honest, most of the big surprises, I think, are in the climax and in the secret bonus level after the credits.
Yeah, so I've just found that secret bonus level, and I finally figured out what the big gray cubes are for. So,
this conversation will actually not mean that much more in context, by the way.
Yeah, so we're kind of talking around structure of the game. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's very much like Super Mario 64 with the big open levels, except for in this time, instead of really ping-ponging back and forth between levels as you would in Super Mario 64, you pretty much complete, like a main quest line in each level in sequence, and then you can go back to levels later and gather more stars, or in this case, they're called moons, power moons.
Although it's also, what's weird is it's both more and less linear than some of the other 3D Mario games, not counting Super Mario 3D Land and World, which were by far the most linear 3D Mario games. Because every time you go to a world, there's like a main quest line, but almost all of them can kind of just be ignored because you can, as long as you get the proper amount of moons, almost all of the bosses you can, I think, ignore actually.
I think there's one kingdom where I didn't do the main quest line just by accident, but
Yeah.
otherwise I generally followed it pretty closely, just because I felt it was like the intended experience, and for the most part, I think that intended experience was the right tack to take. So the way they've structured it, I think, makes sense for the kind of game they were trying to make. It did result in a few levels where I think they directed the player a little too much. Like there's some levels where you can't unlock the rest until you've done something on the critical path. For example, I don't consider this a spoiler because very on the Sand Kingdom, it's very hard to get around unless you do the critical path, and that's really what you're intended to do.
Yeah. Although it's also worth noting, again, you can do part of it and not, because you can. I forget. I'm not sure when. Basically, it's a desert kingdom. It's frozen over. You beat one of the bosses, and that sort of stops it from being frozen over. I'm not sure which boss actually stops that. Yeah.
I think it's actually, if I remember correctly, I think it's actually the last boss, because there are a lot of bosses in that level. And there are a lot of bosses that you sort of fight over and over again, but they get different variations on their attacks each time, which I know some people found repetitive, but I actually found it kind of neat. It felt like I was going through like levels of like a video game within the video game, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought it was like training you for facing the high level bosses. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things I really like about it, and is that it is very much a game that, as open as it is, and even as much of it has like the big critical path, it actually has a lot of interesting designs that sort of indirectly teach you about the game. So, like one of the big standout levels is New Donk City, this kind of giant metropolis that's essentially like a Manhattan style of area. You go through there, you have certain girders, but then you learn about how there are these power lines in the city. And earlier in the game, you've used power lines to sort of zip around levels. And so you start to have to use them to get to certain areas, and then you can realize how you can use them to quickly get up to the tops of buildings, and then from that you can string together jumps to go over the buildings. And so it sends you on paths through what are essentially sandbox areas, but that they've sort of subtly cordoned off almost into kind of levels that snake around each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what they've done very well is, and this is something I think we were complaining about ukulele on the podcast a while back, something ukulele doesn't do very well, where it doesn't draw your attention to landmarks within the level. And it doesn't sort of direct you where to go. Whereas here, the levels are very open. You can go off the beaten path, but it's where the level design and architecture draws your visual attention is generally where you need to go. And the one or two levels in this game that don't, I think, are the weaker levels. There's one level. I think it's not a huge spoiler to say there's a snow-themed level, and
Yep.
it suffers from what I like to call ukulele kind of level design, and it doesn't work as well as some of the other levels that are, I shouldn't say more linear, but are better able at drawing you down a specific path.
Snow Kingdom is definitely the weakest of the levels, and I say that as someone who loves snow levels. I'm sorry, who's typing?
Yeah,
Sorry
I mean,
about
it had its whatchamacallit. It had like the really fun parts that sort of take place underground, but the above ground stuff is all really weak to me. So yeah, overall, I think it's a game I've enjoyed. I like to say that it accidentally ended up being a lot like Nier Automata, and I've been calling it Super Mario Automata as a joke. because it has what it has in common. It has the same sort of capture mechanic as Nier Automata does. It also takes place in a large open space, and there's also a huge amount of endgame content like there is in Nier Automata. The game doesn't really end once the credits roll.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that these two games have have all these lines of similarity that you wouldn't expect.
And that's one of the things I really love about both games is that, like, I think you can get to the end of both of their stories very easily, and that's really satisfying. But it's once you start to, like, pour over a lot of the crazy stuff at the end, it becomes really exciting. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I did the very secret final level, which at the end of the more recent 3D Marios, there's one secret super final level right at the end. And Super Mario Galaxy 2, it's Grandmaster Galaxy. And in 3D World, it's Champion's Road. In Odyssey, it's called Long Journey's End. And all three are kind of like gauntlets that are also collages of the game where you have to master all sorts of different specific mechanics and jump systems and environmental types and tricks and dangers and and you have to go through the whole thing in one go, and it's this incredibly exciting, incredibly difficult, but really satisfying, fun challenge because you're going through this it's kind of like you're going through a celebration of the game itself.
Yeah. And without spoiling anything, there's segments within sort of the main questline proper that also sort of serve that function. Without spoiling anything too heavily, there's one that's 2D and one that's 3D that sort of use all the mechanics from elsewhere in the game and remix them into these two sort of gauntlet-type segments, which I think was really effective.
Yeah, that's one of the things, and I know because obviously I haven't been on the Gamescast this year except for last time, but I think one of the things we keep kind of coming back to, and at the risk of having Merve and I just be the ones talking about this, Pumpkin Pie and Kappa, please chime in here, is that like a lot of what makes this such an interesting year for video games is how many games are really expressive and really interested in expressing these mechanics and their ideas. And so every game has has all of these sections that really feel almost holistic, like every part of them kind of works together. And do you know what I mean? Or am I just...
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are two big trends I've noticed in video games this year. Is that the best video games of the year are very confident in both the ludic or the mechanical ideas and the narrative ideas they want to express. And the other big thing, although I think it's less profound, is that video games this year haven't been afraid to be bizarre.
Yeah.
Right? So even amongst quote unquote the most generic, critically acclaimed video game of the year, I'd say is something like Horizon Zero Dawn. Even that's a game with post-apocalyptic robot dinosaurs. And that's probably the most normal of the games that seem to be in Game of the Year type contention.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And I think, I think that's very much right. There's a comfort with not just being out there, but willing to... I was actually reading an interview with Shigeru Miyamoto a few days ago where he was talking about, this is actually from months ago, where he was talking about how they, the team, the Super Mario Odyssey team, was really scared about how people would react to Mario interacting with kind of normal, Uncanny Valley-looking people in New Donk City. And it's really telling that that's the very first thing you see in promotional materials for Odyssey, is they're not like shying away from it. They're not trying to hide it. It's basically put out straight in the open.
Yeah, I mean, some people I think were put off by it, but I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna roll with this. Let Mario be weird. Let Mario do his strange little pygmy man thing and deal with like the rest of the residents, however they look.
I think it also helps that, and I know I've beaten on this drum a lot, that in something like, say, Sonic Adventure, you have normal people and you have hedgehogs, and in Mario, the normal people are treated as just as weird as the Day of the Dead skeletons, or the fork people, or the robot watering cans.
They're almost like another species, down to, like, they gave half of them, like, stereotypical New York dialect, so one of them's just like, forget about it. Out of nowhere, which is...
Planet Brooklyn.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's Super Mario Odyssey. Pumpkin, what you been playing, man?
Well, for me, I've been playing. I'm a dad of 2 kids, so I don't have a whole lot of time to play games. But most of the time, I'm usually catching up to everybody else. So I'm still playing Arkham Knight for all things. I just got a PS4 maybe about a little over a year ago.
Oh, okay, neat. How you liking Arkham Knight?
Since I'm a Batman enthusiast, and that's to underplay it, it's one of my more favorite games. I'm not really big on the Batmobile. It kind of drives me nuts sometimes.
Nobody is.
It's like I love flying through the city and doing that kind of thing. But the missions that are it has to be done with the Batmobile. You have to blow this up. Okay, all right. It feels like if I was more free to do it when I wanted to, that'd be another thing. But I am required to drive that thing through the city.
Yeah,
so it's a little
bit of a letdown.
But for me, when it comes to games, I'm going on the thread that we were just talking about. Games they're not afraid to get weird this year. I'm wondering what it's going to look like next year. We've got games right now like Wolfenstein 2 that are making kind of political commentary on the climate as it is now. I wonder what kind of games they're going to be like next year that are going to have kind of maybe a little bit of a climate of the current contemporary ideals in the U.S. and maybe the world. Those type of games, fighting games, or just big idea games.
I think at some point we're going to see, given especially the events of the past few weeks, we're probably going to see games where people abuse their power and get their comeuppance. Maybe not next year. I mean, these things have a development time, but at some point, I think this is going to be a theme in our art going forward.
I also, it's also worth though noting that, like, a lot of times, even when games aren't explicitly trying to comment on current events, they are often being made, in the same climate. So you'll probably see a lot of games that kind of inadvertently, or maybe not entirely deliberately, reflect contemporary things.
So not as overt as Wolfenstein because of Nazis.
Well, yeah, Wolfenstein was. I think there was some parts of it that were, I'm not sure. I never played the New Order. My understanding is, in a lot of ways, the New Colossus is very much a follow-up to what it was doing in the New Order. But then they also, as it was going on, presumably they were bringing in real-world politics along with what they were already interested in doing.
Yeah, it seems like it was it seems like they had the idea for the game. They were already making the game, and then once these events started unfolding, they kind of steered into the skid and marketed it a certain way, given the current political climate. I mean, I haven't started Wolfenstein 2 yet. Actually, funny story, I was like, yeah, I should probably I don't know when I'll get around to Wolfenstein 2. This is before it came out. And then I received an email saying, oh, your pre-order's ready. I'm like, wait, I pre-ordered this game? When did that happen? So, yeah, so it's just sitting on my hard drive right now, waiting to be played. But I'll get around to it. We can have a chat about Wolfenstein 2 at some point. Sorry,
I've seen play. I don't own the game myself, but I've seen some of the gameplay at a friend's house, and I saw. I mean, it was when you're saying they steered into the skid, they did so wholeheartedly. They knew who their audience was, and they just played that up really well, I thought. It makes me interested in the game. I'm normally the kind of person, when I say I don't play as often or I'm not able to play as often, when I go into games or when I go to buy games, I think about the certain properties. I'm really, like I said, I'm big on Batman, but I'm also big on characters I can recognize, ones that I'm familiar with, even from my childhood. So I even looked at the Thor game adaptation. Looked at it. I don't know if I'm ever going to get that, but I looked at it. So it's things like that that get my interest. But of course, also fighting Nazis. That's why Medal of Honor exists.
Yeah. I mean, we used to have a whole genre of Nazi fighting shooters before Modern Warfare hit the scene.
Yes.
So,
That was in the Halcyon days when the Nazis were wacky, fun, fictional characters. Instead of going back to being the unfun actual villains.
What cartoony Indiana Jones Last Crusade type villains.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, it used to be that you could, like, melt Nazis and set them on fire and nobody would say anything because they recognize that this is a video game and nobody's actually going out there and setting people on fire or melting them.
But if you had to melt someone with fire, it might as well be a Nazi.
Yeah.
Even at this point, I have to agree, although I'm really not good on violence, except for video game violence. You should never see me play Grand Theft Auto ever. I'm terrible. But
terrible in that you don't use violence, like you politely carjack people.
Hardly. No, I'm ruthless.
Okay.
My real life persona and my Grand Theft Auto persona are so disparate.
Speaking of, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but just in case I haven't. So back when I lived in a dorm in my freshman year of university, the guy who lived across the hall from me, he was like the meekest, quietest guy you'd ever meet. He was like a devout Christian, went to church every Sunday. He had immigrated from China, I think, like 7 or 8 years ago. Anyway, he's like the quietest, meekest guy you'd ever meet. He was super nice. One day, I had my door open. I was playing Vice City, I think, in my room on my computer. He walks in, and like it's normal. It's normal when you live in a dorm. People just walk into your room and like watch you doing whatever you're doing. So he walks in. He's just standing there for a couple of minutes. I'm driving around, and then he says, "Hit the old lady." I'm like, what? No, I'm on a mission. I can't afford to hit the old lady. And then he just starts laughing. He's like, hit that kid. I'm like, there are no kids in this game. He's like, oh, find a kid and hit it. He just like went nuts trying to get me to kill people in my car. I saw him in different lights since then. Still the nicest, meekest guy I'd ever met. But
I think GTA
had kind of a dark streak, shall we say.
I think GTA allowed for pretty much all of us to live through our dark streak, even though, I mean, we're refined, wonderful people in real life, and our real persona are these genuine, nice people. Those games really allowed us to, be demented and without repercussion.
Or without only a token level of repercussion.
Oh, well, yes, very much so. I can remember just hanging out in the apartment and just doing the sniper rifle, on occasion when I'd get bored. And I mean, it's just thinking about it now. It's like, I wonder if somebody would be standing behind me watching me play that game thinking this guy's crazy.
Yeah. I like if my parents have never been big on like video game violence. I wonder what they would react to if they saw me playing video games now. I mean, right now I'm playing Golf Story, so I don't know what they'd think of that. But that's a whole other story. Kappa, what have you been playing?
Nothing but Destiny. Well, some Fallout Shelter here and there, but Destiny too. Our clan's been doing pretty good, actually. People are kind of coming along. We're going to try to raid tonight at 7. It's a weird experience right now because I think a lot of people, and this happens with a lot of games, not just Destiny, but they're comparing the sequel to what was previously like the full game with 4 expansions and just, there's not enough this, there's not enough that. But a lot of that's got to come along.
Yeah, eventually.
It's really kind of shown me like the simplicity and the beauty in WoW, World of Warcraft, always just being one game, if you think of it that way, with a ton of expansions rather than ever making a WoW 2, right? Because like you can always just say it's all this big one long continuation, where I feel that Destiny is, but they have to kind of reset the button to get new people back in. Does that make sense? Like, if they just released another expansion and they said, okay, you guys go play with all these other people who have already got god level gear and all this other stuff, it wouldn't feel any different. It would just be, for most people, be more the same, and you wouldn't get that new blood. So the sequel makes sense. There's actually a story this time around. It's decent. I enjoyed what I played. I mean, obviously there's, a bad guy trying to conquer the world. There's enough feelings and emotions in the game. It does the classic video game thing, though, where all 100,000 people that are playing are the chosen one. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you're the only one who has the ability to do this, but so does everybody else that's ever played the game.
How do they ration out like co-op and PvP?
Well, so I don't know. Spoiling Destiny, but by the end of it, it makes sense. The Guardians in Destiny get their light from the Traveler through these little thing called ghosts that allow them to resurrect infinite number of times and makes them these badass fighters. The Traveler is more or less trapped, kind of, and most Guardians, almost all the Guardians, lose their light. Their ghost is unable to, but the chosen Guardian that you play is able to kind of find a workaround for that. So you spend most of the game kind of going around doing stuff because nobody else can, because if they die for real, if that makes sense. So that there's enough of a story there to kind of base the game around. The campaign's really short. I'd say about 10 hours, but by the end of it, you've learned most of the skills that you're going to need for both PvP and PvE, which is a really good idea for the game itself. I've been having a really good time. Destiny to me is more of a social thing, right? Like, I play with my friends. I mean, like, friends I haven't played forever. And the greatest thing that's happened to me is when it's released on PC, it's Battle.net compatible. It uses Battle.net for, like, its social servers, stuff like that. So all my old friends I used to play a ton of WoW with, ton of Overwatch with, other games have kind of all popped back in, and we've kind of just picked back up where we left off, which is really cool. 3 or 4 good friends I haven't played with in a while showed back up, and then of course added a couple people from the site. It's a social thing. I think if you just look at Destiny as, I want to play it, get to the highest level, beat it, and then that's it for me, you're not going to have a great time with it. But it's about running around with your friends, doing missions, doing stories, that kind of stuff that I really enjoy. So yeah, I mean, I don't know about this one just yet. It feels hard to judge it because of how much time I put into one. I did take a lot of breaks in Destiny 1 between expansions and stuff. I kind of hit that level. I didn't have as many friends. When Destiny 1 came out, it was right at the time basically all the people I played with had kind of fractured, right? Some went to Xbox, some went to PlayStation. Most I know that stayed on PC. So when Destiny 2 was announced for PC, a lot of my friends were like, hey, bring me up to speed with this. And I was like, well, most of them haven't even played Halo, so I don't really have that even common, touchstone with them. So I'm like, well, it's Borderlands, a little more serious, and better mechanics, and I think that kind of sold a lot of them on it. And still liking it. I know there was some controversy with the microtransactions. Really, they're not a big deal. The Destiny subreddit is one of the worst places I can possibly imagine for the game. It's constant complaining. And I don't know if you guys
subreddits can be really toxic.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys
are not cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have experienced this too, but it's like people will make these posts as if they speak for the entire community, right? Like, what you guys got to do, Bungie, is X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, no, I actually kind of like that. Like right now they have an event that a lot of people hate. It's called the Faction Rally. You pledge to a faction, right? There's 3 in the game. Everybody turns in tokens. At the end of it, whatever faction got the most tokens, everybody who was pledged to that faction gets a free weapon, right?
It's like a 3-way Splatfest.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's kind of cool. It's not really game breaking. The faction that wins doesn't really, get anything that everybody else doesn't. But I mean, it's just nothing but complaints about it, And they try to do something cool, kind of a timed event. It used to be in Destiny 1, you would just pledge to a faction, and like if you wore a certain piece of gear, you would get the tokens. But now they said, no, we're not going to do that. Every couple weeks, you don't have to wear the gear, but you just pledge to that faction, and then you get the rewards. But they're trying new stuff. There's a lot of resistance in the community. A lot of people want all the stuff that was in Destiny 1 in Destiny 2. Of course it can't, because they got a model here with season passes and expansions and stuff.
Yeah.
And I know season passes are kind of, another one of those words, but I felt like I got enough content with the season pass for Destiny 1 that I didn't feel bad about buying it for this one. I like their model of 2 small expansions, 1 huge expansion. I think it makes sense for me for what I would expect from a season pass, where it's closer to a DLC model with me. That's kind of what I'm used to, right? My baseline for what I used to call expansion packs was, okay, I get 1 new big expansion pack with a bunch of stuff, but in between I get little, quality of life improvements or new units or skins or stuff like that. And that's basically what you're getting with Destiny for the season pass. You're getting 1 real expansion, 2 little, intermediate expansions, kind of bridge the gap between the base game and the expansion. And along the way, it kind of ramps up your light level and your weapons, and it gives you more of a toolkit to work with, so that when you get to that real expansion, it feels like a totally different game from where you started. Bungie knows what they're doing. I mean, the Activision part of it is always a little scary, but no cheaters, no hackers that I've seen at all. There's a lot of little glitches, like in any kind of these games where people cheese their way through stuff, but nothing I'd call game breaking. And I really enjoyed my time with it so far. And hopefully we're able to raid tonight and get the raid done. It's going to be a bunch of us just trying to figure it all out together.
Yeah, sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's nice that you can get these big cooperative social experiences going. I miss those days when I was younger. I used to play more multiplayer, and I don't as much anymore.
That's one of the best things about it too. I mean, I left that out, but same situation as a lot of you guys. Full-time job, wife, kids, all that stuff. It's hard for me to jump in a game where it requires 3 or 4 hours to make any significant difference. I've always felt like with Destiny, whatever you're doing, it's contributing somehow towards you getting better. You're always working towards something. You're always getting a token. You're always even if it's something you can't use, you can always recycle it into shards, which then you can use and stuff like that. So it kind of values your time, which I think is important in an online game. But it doesn't do it so much in a way like, I don't know, have any of you guys played World of Warcraft recently or?
Never.
Not recently.
Sorry.
Just kind of as a quick aside, it used to be like World of Warcraft used to be really social. You'd meet friends, you'd join a guild, you'd go places with them, do things. That's all gone now. Now you click a button and you're automatically teleported to a dungeon with random people you've never met before who all click the same button, and you guys do the thing together that you all watch videos on from a streamer who did it first. And it feels very mechanical, right? Whereas I never really felt that with Destiny. If my buddy wants to run strikes with me, I jump in with him. We go to the strike. We fly to the planet. Even just those little animations of it doing all that feels very cool. It feels more like you're traveling a universe with a friend rather than just clicking a button in a menu, which is necessarily what you're doing. But a lot of the window dressing that they apply to it makes it feel less like that.
Yeah, I think it's important to have. If you're going to make a social game, you should probably facilitate the social interaction, which, to my understanding, Destiny does really well.
I don't know about well. There's some drawbacks. They have a really good community lead right now, but she's basically saying that she wants the social part of Destiny to be an opt-in experience, which I think maybe we can all kind of at least understand, if not agree with, right? Right. So if you want to talk to people, you basically have to friend them, or there's not a Barons chat or just a general chat in the game on PC, which a lot of people are rankled by. But they're saying, look, has anything ever really good come up those chats? A lot of
of swastikas probably.
Yeah.
A lot of
Their answer to it all is clans, right? So join a clan. There's your group of friends to do things with, and there's a lot of resources off-site, but they're looking at ways to kind of bring in some functionality. But right now, it's kind of a very much an opt-in thing. Even on PC, in order for people to send you, whispers or tells or private messages, you actually have to opt into that even. So people can't, send you messages after a PvP match you scrub, what did you do? But also people can't say, hey, do you want to run the raid with me or anything else? So it's kind of a weird system right now. I don't know which is the right way, but it'll be interesting to see where they end up going with it.
Yeah, it'll be neat to see how it develops, because especially with a game like Destiny, Destiny 1 now is unrecognizable from where it was when it started.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's where this one will end up. And I think what a lot of people are kind of reacting against is that it's not there right now. It doesn't feel. It feels like a continuation in some ways, but it doesn't feel. I don't know, but I think
It doesn't
it'll
feel like it's there yet.
Right, exactly.
All right, let's move on to our favorite segment of the entire podcast. Project Sonic Watch 2017 is back. So we do the segment every time there's an important piece of Sonic news or a new Sonic game comes out because, as you all know, Sonic is the Gamescast's most loved video game franchise. Like, maybe second to Bubsy, which also came out recently. There's a new Bubsy game, if you guys are interested. I'm sure it's incredible.
Every time we do this, I cannot. I just want to argue so much that. I mean, all right, I'm just gonna get time away because I know we always do the Sonic. I get it, but look, Sonic to me is always gonna be. You know how like kids when we were kids, like one kid got the Sega and one kid got the Mario, or one kid got the Sega, one kid got the Nintendo, and so like Sonic was always like the argument to Mario, right? Well, Sonic is cooler. Look at his spikes and stuff. Like I don't know where. Is there really this kind of crazy love for Sonic that we need a game every year that just bombs? Like,
I mean, kids are not kids, but people are buying it, so I guess that there is a need. Personally, you all know me as a very much Mario, maybe aficionado is the right term. I'm not really sure, but Sonic. I feel like we've done this a lot, but it's always worth pointing out that Sonic basically exists as a corporate mascot who was only created to basically front a company and be a rival to a corporate competitor. Like Mario is, I think, the mascot of Nintendo, and in some ways the mascot of gaming as a whole, because it makes sense, because he was designed as a character to work in a video game, and every part of him is designed to emphasize that, because he was created at a time where the technology could not really present a person with a face and hair, so that's why he has a mustache and a hat, and that's why he wears overalls that are red and blue. It's like every part of him is designed to actually serve a function, while Sonic's is very much designed to serve like corporate and marketing ends.
Yeah, and that's why I've never had that attachment to it, right? Like I feel like there's a lot of nostalgia fueling the love for Sonic, but man, guys, I mean, when do we give up on this?
When do we give up?
Well, Sonic Mania is apparently good.
Yeah.
Well, that was the fan one, though, right?
That is the official one made by people who made fan games.
Yeah. And I mean, I can get that. And I'm guessing that had a lot to do with probably nostalgia or people being like, this is the Sonic I remember. But I don't know if there's ever been a 3D Sonic that's been anything other than eh. You know, it's
Generations is apparently good.
I have to say that I've barely played any Sonic games since I was a kid, and the only person in my sphere or my area that loves Sonic is my son. He's 7.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't really know many adults that look at Sonic and think, "Wow, that's the game I got to get."
I would agree with that.
I don't know, but okay.
I really like the Sonic Boom cartoon because it's literally a low-rent version of The Simpsons, but like with Sonic. It's incredibly
it's also
bizarre.
full of like meta jokes, right?
Yeah, probably the most iconic episode is one where Sonic, where Eggman has like built a weapon on the water. And so Sonic, who of course sucks in the water and is terrible in water levels, is terrified, and eventually he has to keep retreating into the recesses of his psyche, and eventually he finds an image of himself that's just Sonic's voice actor, Roger Craig Smith, in real life, wearing a Sonic costume, taking out the garbage.
What?
Wow.
There is an episode, the season 1 finale involves Eggman trying to bring in all of the season's villains, which are not it's not Metal Sonic, it's not Chaos or whatever, it's the intern at the local shitty McDonald's ripoff, the guy who tries to cheat Knuckles out of a mortgage. And,
What?
And then Shadow
This
comes
is cartoon.
And then basically the big gimmick is that Shadow comes in and Eggman is super excited and is basically a Shadow the Hedgehog fanboy. And
God.
it's incredibly bizarre.
I don't know what's going on here.
There are jokes about like Hillary Clinton's email server in an episode that's all about Eggman trying to build a social media site.
Why is Eggman trying to build Facebook?
Because
by an IRS employee.
Well, the premise of the episode is that Eggman has received a chain letter and is terrified about not sending it out to enough people, so he tries to develop a social media site to convince people to be on it.
It's not 1998. We don't do chain letters anymore.
Wow, that is really, really just complicated.
Yeah. There's an episode where Sonic becomes the mayor and basically fast tracks egregious amounts of legislation. And so Eggman tries to become a dictator because Knuckles' meddling has stopped the garbage service from adequately running.
Wait a minute, hold on. That sounds like current events. That sounds like something that actually could happen.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the Sonic Boom cartoon. The reason we're doing Project Sonic Watch today is Sonic Forces just came out. So the new 3D Sonic we were alluding to, and reviews are not good. It's got Metacritic, there are its pitfalls, but it's sitting at a 58 on Metacritic right now.
It looks terrible.
The best review I've heard is from our own Gook extension.
Yeah, Gooch Extension liked it. I've heard people say it's okay, it's not the worst thing in the world, but nobody's running out to buy this and love it.
Yeah, it's weird for me because I feel like a lot of platformers have upped their games lately. You got stuff like Cuphead coming out now. That at least even if you don't like that hard as hell type style of play, at least it looks and plays and sounds gorgeous. So if you don't do that, if you don't have that part of it going for you, and then everything I've been reading about Sonic Forces was that the gameplay itself was bad. So you kind of don't have either. You don't have a unique, interesting look, and you don't have good level design and good gameplay. That's kind of
So the hook here is that not only do you play as Sonic, you also play as your very own Sonic OC. So we're talking about is there a Sonic fandom, really?
This is like 1998 GeoCities pages come to life, basically, right?
It is essentially DeviantArt the game.
Yeah.
I do need to, I do think it's worth pointing out a couple things. For one, is that the premise is that a lot of the story or the game is very, very meta because, a lot of Sonic stories, for better and in a much larger instance for worse, do like to posit Sonic as a weird dystopian adventure, which is bizarre. And that's part of the story, is that you're time traveling and your OC has to rescue Sonic in a dystopian future where Sonic is imprisoned on the moon or something. And Eggman has gathered together a group of past 3D Sonic villains and this new guy who I guess is sort of like a bat made of cubes or something. And so the only way to save the world is to bring in your Sonic OC, who, we'll include some links to videos in the dump. They look terrifying.
Everything about this just... I don't understand why Sonic games are so intent on being serious.
Yeah, that's a good... It's like the DC movies of
platformers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like it always has this weird dark undertone to it. Like Eggman is out there doing all this super evil sounding stuff, but it's goofy. Right? I don't know.
That's actually one of the things I did like about the cartoon, and after this I'll shut up about it, which is that they do kind of tip their hand to that with an episode where Eggman sends Sonic to a dimension where Sonic never existed. And Eggman is, of course, a dictator, but it's just a weird universe where, in this dystopian future, Knuckles is instead a weight training infomercial star.
That's a really odd angle to take.
It's, I think a lot of it is, I mean, Kappa, you said from the very beginning that Sonic, people liked him because he was edgy and spiky and spiny, and I think that's a big part of it. Because Sonic is meant to be cool, he has to be exciting. He can't just be silly or light.
That was also Sega's persona back then too. If you remember, Nintendo was the kiddie console. Sega does what Nintendo don't. You know what I mean? Look at all these adult games. This is a serious system. It's not, and I think a lot of that carried over into their mascot's persona. Where look how serious our goofy blue hedgehog really is. It's
probably
the thing is like the Sonic Boom, like Wolfman's talking about the Sonic Boom cartoons. The Sonic Boom games leaned into the silliness, so it's weird for them to go back to the faux darkness of like adventure and Sonic and Shadow the Hedgehog for this game. Like people like the Sonic Boom games are terrible because they were glitchy pieces of shit, but at least people weren't complaining about the tone. They're like, the tone is right, you just fucked up everything else. So they went back to the same tone and continue to fuck up everything else.
They had a quiet, well, not even quiet, a very loud intensity, and that was Sega's way of selling everything, was intense.
Yeah, literally like that guy screaming Sega. You remember, like that was their whole, it's like that was their thing for a while.
Yeah. It's bizarre. In some ways, it really feels like a culmination of a lot of the weird elements of Sonic branding, in kind of the way that Sonic 2006 was this weird culmination of all of the fundamental, like, ideological problems that is Sonic. Where it's, in that game, it's like trying to rip off, like, a latter-day Final Fantasy game, and also Half-Life 2, and also Dragon Ball Z, and also trying to be a crazy non-linear story, and it tries to have all of these different mechanics, and it's... I think it's really... There's a part in the intro, like the Shadow the Hedgehog, like cinematic CGI intro, that shows Sonic and all of the non-Shadow main characters running around at exactly the same speed, and this is going to sound really weird, but I feel like this is one of the fundamental problems of Sonic on a mechanical level, is that every Sonic game needs to be fast. We can agree on that?
Yeah, it's like the theme of it, yeah.
Yeah. And so every Sonic game has to be built to accommodate a character who can run really, really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to do it in like a very faux scientific way. And so, by extension, every character who interacts in that game has to be able to move at that kind of similar speed. And so you have to design a game to accommodate a system that's incredibly difficult, because you need to make sure that levels are large enough, interactable enough, satisfying enough to go through multiple times. They have to do all these different things. But then you also have to have other characters who can interact with that. And so every character is basically Sonic, but with a different fur color and targeting a different demographic. And so by the end, Sonic himself kind of doesn't matter. And so now you have a Sonic game where Sonic gets to be rescued by your own original character, who uses a grapple gun and a flamethrower and can dress in a surgical mask and a knight's hat and a gamer baseball cap turned backwards.
So it's generic heroic figure here.
Yes, with very creepy eyes.
No, all they need to do is let you 3D custom print it for yourself, and you'll just print money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, Sonic Forces,
not the best.
Yeah. So that's Project Sonic Launch 2017. I'm sure more Sonic news will come for our podcast in the future, and we will report it, because that is our duty here at the Avocado Gamescast. Let's move on to our main topic of discussion. We're going to talk about how video games are depicted in other media. So this is a topic we wanted to talk about for a while, because we spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about video games themselves, or the business of making video games. But video games are now these important cultural artifacts that have influenced other media and now are part of society, and they get depicted in other works like books, television, movies. And in fact, some books and movies have been made explicitly about video games. So I want to start off talking about one of my favorite recent examples of this, which is Wreck-It Ralph. Have you guys seen Wreck-It Ralph?
Absolutely.
Own it.
I have not actually. I want to though.
Yeah, it's a really good movie. So the premise is that there is this guy who plays essentially the villain in a Donkey Kong-esque game.
Yeah.
And he wants to be the hero of his own game. So he goes on a quest sort of hopping through arcade cabinets, and he meets this other girl who's like a glitched character along the way. And events ensue. He has to, at some point, rescue the arcade system. It's, the kind of typical Disney kind of plot structure that you'd expect. But it's really good. Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
The hero's journey.
Yeah, it's like the hero's journey played out in with a lot of video game references, and I think they licensed a lot of video game characters, like existing video game characters, for it. So I think like at some point there's like Sonic the Hedgehog was at like a group therapy session for some reason.
I thought the big thing was the sequence that I've seen, the one part I've seen, which is Ralph in a sort of therapy group with other video game villains like M. Bison and Bowser and Dr.
Yeah,
Eggman.
it's Bowser, not Sonic. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I thought was it's really effective. It plays off nostalgia without making it the point of the experience. It tells an actual story while being chock full of references to video games that people enjoyed. And it understands video games both in the specific referential sense, but also generically, like this is how a video game works, and we're going to structure our plot sort of around how a video game would be structured. So it worked really well to me. Are there any other?
I want to start with. I've got a bunch, but I want to start with one I think that probably had the most impact as me, like not just as a kid, but as like a blossoming, gamer. I don't even hate that term, but whatever.
Yeah.
You guys ever see The Last Starfighter?
Yep.
Nope.
No, sorry.
No? Okay, so I'll just give you a quick summary. Basically, there's an arcade machine, right? And this kid plays it and plays and plays and gets, like, super good at it. And, like, he's setting world records. He's just basically the best at this game. Turns out it's not a game at all. It's aliens put it on Earth to basically try to find out if they could find the best pilot in the world to save their race from extinction. So it's kind of like a test training device out there. So the kid eventually, goes up to space, and he uses his patented move called the Death Blossom to save the aliens, and become kind of the hero of it. It's a goofy, cheesy 80s movie, but I mean, it was always, I'm not going to lie, I mean, probably now still, it's in the back of my mind, like, what if this is, like The Last Starfighter, like, what if this is the test to see if I'm, but playing it, watching that movie a lot, it kind of made me feel like, I don't know, like, video games could be something so much cooler than what they were at the time, because let's be real, around that time they weren't much to them. So I really love that movie, kind of as a cheesy. It's in that like Flight of the Navigator type vein of movies that were kind of popular at the time, where the kid is the chosen one and has to go to space or fight aliens or do whatever.
90% of science fiction is a little boy has the power to save the world.
Yeah.
Well, I think it also jumped on the whole, Star Wars and Tron. Let's see if we can have Star Wars and Tron in one movie. And then
that's actually, I never even thought about it. That's a really good way to kind of, put it all together. You got the chosen one, but also you've got this crazy video game world and aliens. And it was a cool movie as a kid to watch. I mean, it probably doesn't hold up like 99% of the stuff I remember, but I always liked it. I even like to this day, whenever I use like the bomb, in like those like bullet hell games, I'm always like, yeah, here comes the Death Blossom. Like, it's in the back of my mind. So it always stuck with me. And it's one of those first really early video game movies, that video game depicted as a movie. And of course, my parents never really got it. They're like, what do you mean this is dumb? But I did like it.
That sounds unbelievably similar to what I guess was probably the one around which we're all kind of dancing. And I think, Kappa, you might be the only one who's actually experienced, and that's Ready Player One by who's
Ernest
that guy?
Cline.
Yeah,
Ernest Cline. Yeah.
I have a feeling that he based so Ready Player One is weird for me because it kind of feels to me like. Did you guys see the last season of South Park at all?
Nope.
Okay,
Sorry,
so
no.
they had this kind of ongoing thing called member berries, where it's just kind of like the idea behind it is that nostalgia just for nostalgia's sake. It's just kind of like it scratches an itch for some people. That's what Ready Player One really was for me. It was just a lot of, pop culture references, 80s kids, 90s kids type stuff, but it really didn't go anywhere with them for me. It just kind of had them exist. It had a lot of little cool ideas. The plot is more or less. Do you guys remember Peter Molyneux when he did the cube thing? The little yeah. So it's kind of like that same idea. Somebody's going to win a world-changing thing from this best game developer thing. He's hidden it inside this MMO, and it's all hidden behind layers of kind of like 80s and 90s trivia, but they're really kind of. I don't know. Like, I'm sure that a lot of people were like, "Cool, I got that, I knew that." But like to me, it was like, "Oh yeah, everybody's gonna know that." Like, if you were to post most of the stuff just on the avocado in general, we'd all get it. Like it's not like it's super deep type stuff. So I think there was a lot of kind of that going on in the background. It wasn't awful. I mean, I see the hate it gets, and to me, I mean, I get people maybe hate the guy who wrote it or whatever, but it's not deserving of it. It's kind of like. It's so innocuous to me. Like it doesn't deserve either it doesn't deserve to be put on pause. It doesn't deserve to be kicked in the gut. But when Steven Spielberg is going to be the one doing it, I can see kind of where people are running along with that. But it was just, to me, it was just okay. It's a book I wouldn't encourage anybody to read, but maybe if you're really hard up just to have a nostalgia trip down memory lane, it might be fun. But no, Last Starfighter, I think in some ways it was a lot. It was different in that the kid in Last Starfighter is kind of just one, like he's just like given a gift, like he's just like the chosen one. He's not the kind of kid who studied all up on how to all this weird 80s trivia type stuff that like the kid in the book or the kid in Ready Player One does. So it's kind of different in that way. It's more of like a Luke Skywalker type thing. And it's a little more adult in some ways. Even though Ready Player One has this really grim, dark, post-apocalyptic feel in the background, but once they're in the game world, it really never comes back up. So yeah, I can kind of see where that's similar, but no, this is more like kid in a trailer park. He has the gift, saves an alien species, and then due to his skill at a video game. I
think games in general, when it comes to movies, are probably depicted better in films than they are, say, on television. And from my understanding, it's mostly because television views anything else outside of it as competition. So, of course, they're not going to view movies as being great. They're probably going to make a movie like, for example, Seinfeld would have movies called Rachel, or Rochelle, making fun of movies and making them seem dumb. And
I don't think that's so much of like a weird like metatextual competition. I just think that's like an enduring cynicism.
It's a short
Seinfeld.
It's a shortcut to showing that a character is like lazy or immature, is to show them like sitting on a couch staring at a game screen playing a video game, right? Like I'm thinking particularly of what was that scene in Breaking Bad where Jesse's playing like a video game when he's kind of just like done with everything.
I believe it's actually Sonic the Hedgehog 2006.
Really?
I'm pretty sure that it might not be that, but there's definitely a part where Sonic 06 or Sonic Unleashed shows up, and I honestly don't know how to react to that.
But it's definitely shown as like he's given up. He's just checked out of the world, and he's just, he's playing video games, so he must be done with everything. It's kind of used as that type of like shortcut, and I've seen that a lot in TV depictions of video games, where it's just, it cuts to a character just kind of slouched back on a couch with the controller in his hand, kind of a dead look in his eyes, playing in a game, and like that's the TV shorthand for like, look at this lazy schlub or whatever. Broad City does it a lot too with Bevers. Where he's kind of on the couch playing video games where, Abby's trying to do all this stuff, and it's just, well, look how lazy this schlub is, but that's his character. I get it. But I mean, that's kind of a short show a guy playing video games, and that to me that's always been like what TV does with it, and why a lot of TV examples I think are a lot less interesting than what I see from movies that are kind of focused around, there might be more to this video game stuff, especially in the 80s. I mean, Tron, you mentioned. The other one I was going to mention was War Games, of course. That was a really kind of early example of, I guess, what could go wrong with video games. What in that kind of height of, computers are scary type feel. War Games was always that one where, what if a kid could destroy the world by beating a computer in a game type thing.
I think with the 80s, that really stemmed from two things. One is that video games were this like crazy neon weird possible thing, while in the 90s and onwards, obviously video games have come a long way in terms of graphics and the potential for storytelling and the diversity of audiences they can reach, but they're not really exciting in that way. And the other is that, to be honest, a lot of those 80 movies were kind of just shallow and looking for a new trend.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's very much like something they picked up on to run with.
It's like, honestly, I mean, quality aside, it's really not necessarily any different from something like, say, Break Into Electric Boogaloo or or Rappin', which was the Canon Group's. They wanted to rip off their own film, so they did a rap version of Break-In called Rappin'.
You guys remember? I don't know if you ever saw this one. There was along those lines. There's a movie called The Wizard with Fred Savage, where it's kind of like a feel-good movie, where they're going to go play in this video game championship, and like the bad guy has the power glove, and that's how he's able to beat everybody. It was very commercial feeling. But yeah, that was kind of along the lines of, I think, what you're saying, which is where Hollywood just kind of viewed video games in a way of like this kind of like, this is where all the kids are going to be at, so let's kind of pull them in with this thing that makes absolutely no sense in a way. But it was a weird movie, and that one always kind of like, there was a counselor that taught them video games, remember? And there was like a house that they all went to learn skills, and it was not focused on realism, but a real weird movie.
I just remember the kid that was the wizard was didn't talk very much, and so of course all gamers don't talk very much. They're all inward. They're all quiet, until they get put in front of a game, and all of a sudden they're geniuses, and everything goes great.
That's probably why I feel like some of them are interesting. Depictions of games aren't ones involving real games. Like, one of the ones I was thinking of was Existence, David Cronenberg horror thriller, where video games, where it's kind of like a lot of things Cronenberg does, it's an intersection of sex and flesh. So people play video games on like human-style organs that can go into their minds, and so it's not so much of video games as this weird outside force or this kind of corrupting influence. It's just another part of something that you dissect.
Yeah. So Existence was one I really thought of too, and I gotta say, one of my favorite things to do, like just in life, is how Cronenberg always creates these like weird words for like futuristic type things. People they plug into the biojack, and once they're in the biojack, they go down the neuro portal into like, I just love all that stuff about that movie, because like everything has this cool futuristic sounding name, and people just throw it around like, oh yeah, of course you should know what we're talking about. Along that line, Lawnmower Man too, right? That's kind of another one that was a little bit like that, where you go into this crazy weird video game world, and it's you can be God there. And I don't know if that was the first, but it's definitely one of the first I remember, where that whole idea where if you die in virtual reality, you die in real life, and that definitely kind of stuck around
like Sword Art's
forever.
the big one like that nowadays.
Well,
yeah,
that influence,
certainly The Matrix.
Yeah, it's going to go through also. It's like that influence The Matrix, with that being a whole, essentially a game setup. You go punch into the Matrix, and you're playing a game again.
Yeah. It's very much, I mean, in The Matrix, you get extra power-ups, you get new weapons and tools, you level up. at one point you even fight a boss. Actually, Aliens kind of has a very similar structure.
Which is really sad that there was never a good Matrix video game, right? I mean,
Oh, it would have been awesome if they did.
yeah. God, what a wasted opportunity there.
Also, kind of going on that road, there's another game that I really think is ultimately about video games that no one really talks about it as a video game, and that's Inception.
That's a good one. Yeah.
With the different levels.
It's like one big cheat code too.
That's why I understood how people couldn't appreciate that movie. I didn't understand it. What was going on? Have you never played a video game in your entire life?
Yeah, you're in another level now. You just imagine, you're on this level. But that's a really good example. Inception as a video game movie. I mean, but there's a lot of weird stuff going on in that movie besides just the dream stuff too.
That's why, to be honest, I see like Inception and Existence and The Matrix is sort of like the gallant to the goofus that is the sickening and repulsive gamer, not the term which, like you, Kappa, I don't like. I'm talking about the Neville Dean
Gerard
Taylor
Butler movie.
Yes, the Neville Dean Taylor movie starring Gerard Butler, where Milo Ventimiglia from Heroes plays a rapist, and basically there's only 2 video games in this universe where people are Michael C. Hall, who, in his like most ridiculous Southern accent, traps like convicted felons in a video game universe where other people can like hunt them for sport. And there's only 2 types of games in this universe, and that's a very like brown, banal Call of Duty clone or Counter-Strike clone, and then one that's like meant to be kind of like a Second Life. That's this weird hyper-sexed, miserable world, and it's just a deeply unpleasant movie, but it's kind of this interesting way that people, I think, like when we're talking about games, there's this idea of them being in spaces, and that's something that I think maybe the best video game movies can be about, because I've got one example, where they're about people kind of entering these distinct spaces where the rules are a little different and what you're supposed to do is a little different.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is probably based on when games first came out. You got a lot of people who like see a kid on a couch and just be totally zoned out, and they were like, I think behind a lot of that is the idea that games are going to take you over. You're going to lose yourself. You're going to lose who you are just by playing this game long enough. And that's in the background of a lot of movies, if you think about it, about games.
Yeah. One question I have, Merve, are you interested in talking about film adaptation or cartoon adaptations of video games? Because I feel like that's a whole important area, because a lot of those are very much about video games, whether or not they know it.
Sure. I mean, I think, like, going off that, sort of segue into that, there have been a lot of cartoons sort of not about existing video game properties, but about video games in general. And especially it's been a huge theme in anime. Like I've got a list here of just anime about video games. There's like Sword Art Online, Gamers, New Game, Hack, Recover, and MMO Junkie, and there's a lot more too. There are also series like Konosuba. They're about sending people to video game-esque worlds, and in those cases, like it's almost a genre. Like some of these are just about like people who play video games or make video games, but series like Sword Art Online or Hack are about people like plugging into video game worlds, getting lost in them. And Sword Art Online is, one I shouldn't say the originator of the meme, one of the popularizers of the meme. If you die in the game, you die in real life. So it's got all of these elements that we were talking about earlier, like having this other world, having people sort of get lost in a video game, as Kappa mentioned earlier. But those are cartoons about fictional video games. They're also, as you mentioned, Wolfman, cartoons based on video game properties. The one that I remember growing up was, do you guys remember the Donkey Kong Country 3D animated cartoon?
Yeah.
I do.
Really ugly and terrible.
Yeah,
We've been watching, well, not been, we tried watching it a couple times in Rabbit because we have a goal to try to watch as many video game adaptations as possible, and we couldn't last more than like 3 minutes both times. It's atrocious.
Yeah, there's
It's so bad. It's all up on YouTube if you ever want to watch it.
yeah. My kid had gotten into the Mario series. You know, the live action slash.
The Super Mario Brothers
Yeah.
Super Show.
Oh man, what an awful show. I mean, it's just awful.
Captain
The live action.
Albano.
I mean, like
Danny Wells.
I think until you've watched it, you probably might have some good memories about it. But oh man, I'm telling you.
I actually, was at a midnight launch for Super Smash Brothers Brawl and actually won a DVD of them for like 6 episodes. I've watched actually a ton of it because I'm obsessed with dad everything.
As a parent, I have to veto some things that my kids do. For example, that Mario show, they tried to start watching on Netflix. I don't know how long ago it was, but I had to be like, no, you guys need to find another show to watch.
Yeah,
So,
I give them a couple, and then I'm like, nah, we're done.
well, from there they moved directly to the Sonic show. I was like, what do you hate?
Like,
Do you hate that much? That Sonic show was terrible. I mean, it was almost as if somebody thought, it's the thought of having that show and then having it make no point. There was no point to the game, to not only the game to me, but also the show itself. It had served no purpose other than put a product on the screen somehow.
It's funny you mentioned the Sonic cartoon because there's like 5 Sonic cartoons.
Well,
There's
the one from the 90s that had...
there's 2 from the 90s. They actually ran... I think you mean the one where it's a dystopian future.
Yes.
Because the thing is that was actually airing opposite another Sonic cartoon. That was specifically
How many friggin' Sonic cartoons they need, man?
None, but well, except for Sonic Boom.
How many games do they need? That's the answer right there.
Because the world needs Sonic.
Because there's Sonic the Hedgehog, which was the one starring Jaleel White, and it's like very bad Tex Avery cartoon that's like very incomprehensible. Then there's Sonic the Hedgehog, which was at Saturday AM, so the fans call it Sonic Sat AM, which was Sonic in a dystopia. And then there was Sonic Underground, which is also these first 3 cartoons all star Jaleel White. Sonic Underground actually
was he like the voice of Sonic at any point, or was that just the cartoon thing?
He was effectively the cartoon voice of Sonic, where Jaleel White plays not just Sonic, but Sonia and I think his name's Sanic or Manic maybe. Basically, he plays Sonic and 2 twins of Sonic who are like musicians, and they go off in this like destroyed fantasy world to rescue their mother while also playing music.
Which one had Sonic's like grandfather or dad or something like that? Because
I don't know.
Oh, because there was one that my kids were watching. I'm telling you, I've had to veto a lot of shows, and there was one where Sonic had rescued his. I think it was his dad because it was like an older version of Sonic, looked exactly like Sonic except grayer, a little bit grayer, still blue. So that was the only way you could tell
like
them apart.
Teal Sonic.
Yeah,
No,
that might be Sonic Underground.
More like a dusty Sonic. Dusty.
Yeah.
That's what it looked like to me. And my kids just, I feel like a failure as a parent because they have such poor taste.
Yeah.
It's worse on YouTube though. I mean, YouTube's always worse. I don't know how many times I come home and he's watching like a video of someone opening like gifts and like weird stuff like that. I'm like, what is this?
Well, my son's now into watching stuff on Amazon. The ones where people are playing Lego games.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
The playthroughs. So that's
Yeah.
so he's branched out into other things that kind of make me think I'm not doing very well.
So not like the Lego game, like not like Lego cartoons, but like Lego game Let's Plays.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's Plays are, I don't get them. But
Right now it's the Star Wars, The Force Awakens, or the original trilogy, and then he's moving on to The Force Awakens, I'm sure.
So I got one I wanted to circle back around to real quick, if you guys don't mind. And I know I'm kind of on the record for not being a super fan of this one, but Scott Pilgrim, to me, is one I've never really been able to place. I know it's got a lot of video game references, but it's also got just a lot of just references in general. Honestly, reminds me a lot of Ready Player One in some ways.
I think it's kind of like Ready Player One, though. From what I understand of Ready Player One, it's so much like laser focused on the 80s to the point of trying to be a Last Starfighter riff, but specifically for an audience that was born after the Last Starfighter, which has always kind of skeeved me out because this is something that I had a problem with things like Community, where it was about people, like young people who were just disproportionately interested in things from like 20, 30 years before them, because that's what, not because, it's cool to like retro things, which it is, but because it seemed very clearly to be people kind of foisting, or like authors foisting their interests on people, like onto a younger generation, which is kind of what it feels like Ukulele ended up doing.
Right. Yeah. Like not ignoring what's happened between now and then and just I don't know what to describe, just basically redoing it over again without learning any of the lessons.
Yeah. And
I mean, Ukulele's a little different. It's like, it's even worse. It's like, it looked at what happened in the intervening years, said, nah, that's all stupid. Let me go back to what we did before and do it worse.
Well, I think, that's a lesson in not totally listening to the internet, right? Sometimes the internet can be wrong. Sometimes they tell you they want something, but they really don't, right?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things, and I feel like we were talking about Sonic, and I kept thinking back to some very smart people on some of the Gameological Society who were talking about this, and with Ukulele, another thing is that, this was a Kickstarter project, and as far as I can tell, delivered every single one of their promises. The problem is that some of those promises included things like a minecart level on every world. And
I mean,
what, like Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom type?
Yeah, but
like a
it's
Donkey
not
Kong
like
Country minecart.
Okay, that.
But here's the thing: it's not like the minecart levels are inherently bad. It's just that the controls for this particular minecart minigame are just utter shit. I can imagine them making similar. I mean, also the objective that you have to collect a certain amount of gems instead of just make it to the end of the level is really stupid.
Yeah,
it's just the mechanics and the structure of those levels is what makes them terrible. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. They just fucked up everything. Like, if they just made Banjo-Kazooie again, I don't think people would be as angry about it as they are. It's that they fucked up making Banjo-Kazooie again. That's the problem.
Sorry, I'm sorry for that digression.
No, it's fine.
But I do think
your
that
point that they didn't learn anything from the intervening 20 years of video games, that was well taken, because they really didn't. It's like there are multiple sins here. They didn't learn anything about the development of video games, and then they couldn't even recreate what they did before.
Yeah, that's like the double negative.
It also feels. Sorry. Yeah, it also feels especially egregious in a year that had, like you yourself, Kappa, mentioned that, there's been something of a cool platformer renaissance this year, like Super Mario Odyssey, Cuphead, A Hat in Time, Snake Pass, are all games that came out, and all of them, took in stuff from old games and added a bunch of new stuff. And
updated nostalgia, if you will.
Yeah. I don't necessarly think. Well, in some of those cases, I don't necessarily think
not so much Cuphead, unless you were from the 30s, but
or the 90s, because it took a lot from crypto, quasi-shooter, quasi-platform action games like Contra.
Yeah, Cuphead's such an interesting game to me. I feel like I still haven't really. I beat it, but I still feel like I want to go back and do more with it. But it's so difficult. It's kind of one of those games that it's hard to go back and replay. Once you kind of know the boss tells and stuff like that, but I really enjoyed my time with it. I kind of hope that's one of those games that people look at and say, you know what, there's a space for hard games with a unique aesthetic that are trying to do something neat rather than just, because I feel like Super Meat Boy did one of those things, right? It made a really hard game, but it wasn't a really cool aesthetic. I never really liked it, but that kind of set off the new, let's make game platformers that are hard. So I do appreciate that part of it, but Cuphead kind of refined it, and I think really hit a nice spot with it.
Well, I'm not saying updated nostalgia in a derogatory sense. It's it's in this particular case with Cuphead and Super Mario. It's that they had nostalgia. It's a familiar product or something feels familiar, and they've done a good job of updating it to our present time in regards to gameplay, as opposed to other that have that aesthetic where it's something you've played before and it's been 20 years or something like that, and yet they still have a shitty setup for it.
Yeah,
that's what I mean. So the updated nostalgia, and it could go either way, but in the case of Cuphead, it's really well done, and it looks like somebody actually cared to make something that was awesome, as opposed to just something thrown together. Here, buy this.
Oh, this is totally an aside.
Put into it. Yeah, go ahead.
But I think, in all honesty, I think more than anything else, the depiction of games in other media kind of just comes down to that part in Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, when Freddy Krueger kills someone with a power glove and then says,
"Now I'm playing with power."
Power, yes. Or any of the parts in like a movie based on a video game where the bad guy says, "Game over." Wait,
but nobody ever uses the Mortal Kombat finishes except for in Mortal Kombat games, or movies, or that kind of thing.
Yeah,
they had that kind of throwback or had that kind of mention in some random movie. It's like finish him, and then and that's fatality. That would be, I don't know, depending on the setup, but usually that would work out pretty funny.
Yeah, it is interesting, though, that, like, all of the straight video game adaptations have to feel, like, self-conscious about making them about video games. And I sort of get that, and it's kind of wondering, like, is there a video game adaptation that could work, without trying to be about that language? And should there be?
I went to bat for Assassin's Creed so hard before that last movie came out, and goddamn, do I regret that.
I mean,
I still think there's the most potential for that one, but man, did they miss on that one.
Not Mass Effect, maybe?
Maybe. I mean, I think Mass Effect's a harder one because, everybody kind of... I have a Paragon Shepherd. You have, I can't remember, Renegade Shepherd. You're like, yeah. So, I mean, maybe there's a little bit less there. I bet you could do one in the Mass Effect universe, but I kind of feel like Valerian stole a lot of that thunder.
Yeah, well, it would have, but Valerian was also a huge commercial flop.
Yeah, exactly. But
so I don't...
I was talking with Banner about this, and I said, I don't know, but I haven't seen the movie, but I just said it was hard for me to watch because the aesthetic was so clearly cribbed from Mass Effect for me. I mean, just in the shots and the stuff I saw, it was just weird to me.
Well, both Mass Effect and Luc Besson were drawing a lot from, like, 80s science fiction.
Yeah, it's, like, even down to, in the original Mass Effect, from the score and the film grain effect, is really meant to evoke... the 80s sci-fi look, but sort of update the digital parts of it to look more like the computers of today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they got the airbrushed 80s sort of metal look with white everywhere, but with the hollow monitors of more recent science fiction.
Honestly, this is going to sound really weird, and I don't think any of you are going to agree with me, and some of you may openly balk at what I'm about to say. But to me, the best video game movie, and by that I mean the best movie about a video game, but also one of the best movies about video games in general, is the fifth Resident Evil movie.
Which one was that one?
Retribution. Because what's crazy
about...
about...
on the roof?
No, that is 4.
Okay.
5, what's...
Against you on it. I can't speak against you because I've never seen that one. I gave up after the second one.
Oh, yeah, no, the Resident... I became really fascinated... a few months ago with Resident Evil. I mentioned this earlier. Me and the rest of the Rabbit crew and the Avocado, we watch movies together. And we've been really interested in movies based on video games and shows based on video games. And we did Resident Evil. And one of the things we found as the series went on is that we actually kind of really started liking some of them. And the fifth one is easily the best because it's... the premise is that the main character, who is a character who's original to the film series called Alice, who is played by Mila Jovovich, and also the wife of the series main creative figure Paul W.S. Anderson, is going to this base, like the villain's base, and they keep trapping her in these larger rooms and scenarios that are setups for video games, basically. And so while they do that, they bring back monsters from other movies and monsters from the games and characters from the games and characters from the earlier movies, and everything's kind of interacting. And so it's kind of a movie about being trapped in a Resident Evil movie adaptation.
So it's like a movie about video games almost.
Yeah, it's really fascinating and weird. Like it's an action, like it's also a pretty fun action movie in general, but it's weird because it's like it's almost like also kind of about weighing the value of different things. So like they kill off a lot of characters who were original to the movies in favor of new characters who were who were characters from the actual games. It's just really bizarre and weird, but it's also really cool.
Well, I'll have to see it to let you know.
Of course.
But after the second one, I really got to tell you, I mean, after
the second one's atrocious.
It was just awful. And when a movie like that gets put out, I will give up. Okay, there's no going back. I don't want to get cheated again.
Oh yeah, no. I should say that your tolerance for like camp or some sort of, to put it mildly, technical or narrative imperfections has to be fairly. You have to be fairly tolerant of them. But I do.
Kind for the second.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I feel that you're being very kind to the second one.
Oh no, the second one's atrocious. It's god awful. No, it's bad. It is an incredibly bad, very unpleasant experience. I would not say anything else.
Well, when it comes to video game adaptations, I can't speak against that one, but the one that I would say is the worst one that I've ever seen or paid money for was Annihilation, Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Yeah. Mortal Kombat Annihilation was not a good movie.
That's understatement. But
yeah.
What is the best? I mean, that's the best one for you. What's the best one for you, Merve? Like, what's the best?
Like video game adaptation?
Yeah.
I think I've managed to avoid every single video game movie.
Even
every single one.
Even the one.
Sorry.
Oh, you go. Kappa.
Yeah, like I've seen movies like based like about video games. I've seen Wreck-It Ralph, but I've never seen a movie based on an existing video game property. I don't think. Like I haven't even seen Tomb Raider.
The new Tomb Raider looks like it's going to be at least hitting a lot of the right moments. It's got some good. I'm not going to go to bat for any video game movies anymore. I got burned so bad.
Not even. I'm really interested in seeing the Ace Attorney movie by Takashi Miike.
See, that seems like it might be promising.
Yeah, it exists. Like, it came out. It's apparently really weird, and it presents, like, to try to get at that video game thing, it presents a world where all the lawyers in the movie throw evidence at each other. Like, they throw digital evidence at each other, like fighting game attacks.
That actually sounds
Ace
amazing.
Attorney?
Yeah, Phoenix Wright.
I'm trying to think of the one I would call the best, and that people wouldn't immediately go, "You're crazy." Maybe the Prince of Persia one with Jake Gyllenhaal.
I feel like that one was kind of quickly forgotten.
It was
because
it wasn't a bomb. It wasn't great. Plus Gyllenhaal with his flowing locks.
I don't know what it got like critically wise. I would bet if I had a guess, it was probably like mixed on Rotten Tomatoes or something. I don't think
it was very
probably...
low.
Really.
It was pretty low.
I'm just going like trying to think off the top of my head. Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic or whatever you have. What do you think would be like the highest rated one?
The highest rated?
Yeah.
Ooh,
probably I'd honestly assume it was
Tron
the first.
Legacy?
Like what one would like
Legacy
the critics like?
Probably the first Mortal Kombat, maybe.
The first Resident Evil also, I think, got a certain degree of praise.
People were actually okay with Tron Legacy. I didn't like it at all because I thought the aesthetic was just wrong. But people were on that. I mean, also Tron Legacy is a little bit of a weird one because Tron was first a movie, then a video game, and then a movie again. But the video game is great, guys. Tron 2.0, that game is fun as hell.
You're gonna end up seeing movie-wise. You're gonna end up seeing another Warcraft movie because that made apparently the most money of any video game adaptation ever.
It did boffo box office in China.
I didn't hate it. I mean, again, I'm not one I'm going to go to bat for. I saw my wife who'd never touched anything Warcraft in her life before, and she thought it was pretty interesting from a newcomer. I think much like maybe like the recent Dark Tower, they try to do too much with not enough movie and just kind of ran with it, and it really didn't come forward at all. if I had to pick my favorite movie, favorite video game movie, probably not as well regarded, I'd probably go with Forward Unto Dawn. I don't know if you guys saw that one.
No.
That's the Halo one, right?
Yeah.
It's on Netflix, I think I saw it. I think.
It's pretty good. I mean, for what it is, it's an intro to Halo if you've never really, followed Halo, but it kind of talks about, how people go from it's basically the first contact, the first time they realize that they're not alone and they attack. They're attacked. It
wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. The way it was done, the look of it was pretty good.
Yeah, Halo's one of my favorite universes. If I could see some, they also had that Nightfall show for a while. Rumors were that Spielberg was going to pick up and run with that. I think Nightfall ended up getting produced by Ridley Scott, I think. I'm not 100% about that, but that was Nightfall. It's the one starring what's his name, John Coulter from Luke Cage. John Coulter. Mike Coulter?
Mike Colton.
Mike Colton, yeah.
Mike Coulter.
It starred him.
It's Ridley Scott and starring Mike Coulter. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one. Another pretty good one. It was. I think you could only watch that if you bought Halo 5 though, and it's only available on like the Halo channel. So nobody watched it. It's just weird to me. You make a Ridley Scott produce, right around the time Mike Coulter was becoming a big thing, but the only way to watch it is through that weird Halo channel. I guess you can probably buy it, but that one wasn't bad either. But Halo's done okay for me in terms of movies.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say is a few minutes ago, the listeners may have heard some typing. That was me because while we were talking, I wanted to look up just a list of movies based on video games, and this is a somewhat lamentable one. I mean, honestly, one of the better ones here is the much maligned, also but yet very entertaining Street Fighter movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julia.
Ugh.
Which I still like because honestly, you know what? It's a really fun performance by Raul Julia. In the movie, in the movie is smart enough to lean on him more than anyone else.
He's the only one who really got what they were going for, honestly.
I think Van Damme did too. Like, I think he knew it was
nominated actor, and he knew where he was standing. He was clad in complete leather, wearing this ridiculous just a ridiculous outfit for a character.
Well,
and he knew
close to the end of his life.
Yeah, and he just dove in. He was like, you know what? Fuck it.
Yeah.
I mean, he makes that movie, and I honestly think it's an entertaining film I like to watch because, and he is, of course, most of it, but that doesn't really mean it's bad when he's in like 60% of the movie.
Yeah.
I remember when
there's
that
also
came out, and that was, oh, wow. Yeah, even then the critics were savage.
I'm also looking at the Doom movie starring Carl Urban and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, a Doom movie?
It was awful. They had a sequence that was all first person. Like, I think people like ended up puking in the theater. It was.
Oh, it's like Hardcore Henry was all in first person. That's another one, right? That was a video game-ish movie starring Charlton Copley, I want to say.
Is it anywhere? I don't know where. I haven't had a chance to see it. I didn't see it in the theater. Didn't want to, but I've been looking for it to be on some, HBO Go or on Netflix or Prime. It's not on any of those. It's like it just disappeared. Bye.
Incidentally, the Doom movie, Merve, some fun facts. It was directed by Andrei Barkowiak, who is the guy who did Exit Wounds starring DMX and Steven Seagal, Romeo Must Die starring Jet Li.
Hey, that wasn't bad.
And Cradle to the Grave.
Romeo Must Die with Aaliyah, like before she died. Yeah, that was actually a decent film. I mean, it was pretty decent.
Definitely had a motif you like to work in, huh? What about documentaries though, like King of Kong or any of those other ones? You guys watch any of those?
Yes, King of Kong, Fistful of Dollars. That's quarters. I'm sorry. That was great. I didn't know what to expect from that. And I started watching it, and the guy with the mullet, the villain, if you will, the one with the record,
sells the hot sauce.
That was it was riveting, and it was just about Kong. It just incredible.
I believe you mean hot sauce and restaurant entrepreneur Billy Mitchell.
You could have put any title under that guy, and I would have believed it. You could have put he sold airplanes to homeless children. I'd be like, yeah, it sounds like that's what he does. Like, he just has a face for scamming. It's
every time I think of that guy, all I can think is mullet and how serious he was about his record.
Oh man,
Dude,
yeah.
Take it down a few notches there.
I gotta imagine some of that's editing. I mean, I don't think anybody can be 100% like that, but
I don't know. If anyone seems like they can be like Billy Mitchell 100% of the time,
he just never turned that off.
It's possible.
How was Indie Game the movie?
I've actually not seen it.
It's
Which one?
Boring. The one it's on Steam. I have a very reflexive. I don't want to say hate's too strong, but Phil Fish and Jonathan Blow both just strike me as just extremely pretentious, and I don't know. I just very eye rolling on every time those two were on screen. Especially since afterwards, shortly afterwards, Phil Fish basically, took his ball and went home after people were mean to him and a bunch of other stuff. And I don't think Fez was as good as people, kind of went crazy with. But Jonathan Blow, I think he's a little more low-key about it. I didn't mind him as much. But just between the two of them, I couldn't follow a whole movie by them, too.
What was the movie exactly?
It's called Indie Game, the movie.
Yeah, it's a documentary about, I think, the making of Braid and Fez, I want to say?
And Super Meat Boy is the third one. Yeah,
and that's Ed McMillan, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what you guys think about them, but it's definitely more about their personalities and how like these things are labors of love and stuff like that. The Super Meat Boy guys are a little bit more kind of upbeat and talking about like how things got good for them and everything. But Phil Fish is still kind of just the moody guy that I don't know. I guess you have an opinion about him.
Yeah, Fez, I mean, I'm sure he makes great video games, but sometimes making great video games doesn't make for the best personality for being a documentary subject.
Yeah, it made me wonder why he wanted to do it, to be honest with you. It just didn't seem like his kind of thing to be inside a movie like that. I mean, remember, Fez had a hugely long development cycle. I want to say it was like 7 or 8 years or something like that, maybe shorter, but it was a long time coming. So yeah, I don't know. He was probably so lost in it at the time that maybe they had an agreement to do the movie before then. But yeah, since then he's kind of quit the industry and a bunch of other stuff.
7 or 8 years in development, just production.
I think it started out as like a labor of love type thing, and then he kind of shifted it. He shifted it from 2 or 3 different types of games. I don't think it always was going to be a platform game. I think it was going to be something else.
It was a platformer, like action RPG with enemies and like leveling up and health. And eventually he cut all that out because the part that he realized was the most interesting and the most like valuable was just the perspective switching.
Well, and that's around the time that he used to work with another guy, and the movie kind of centers around the legal dispute where the guy who kind of did all the art and assets and everything else for the game basically was like in this legal dispute for the game because he wanted to really do it all himself. And then so like there's kind of this legal dispute of who owns what. If some guy did all this stuff, but you decide to switch the direction of the game, that's the real big kind of like tense moment in the Indie Game, the movie. But there's also a real like a scene. I'm sure I don't know if you guys heard about it. If you followed anything about the movie at all, there's a scene where he like basically says that. Well, he doesn't really say. He gets really emotionally invested, but later on. And in the movie, I think he does say this. I haven't seen it in a while, but he basically says if the game doesn't release, like because of the lawsuit, and they portray the other guy on the other end of the lawsuit really negatively. So don't. But Phil Fish says he's going to kill himself if the game doesn't release, and everybody's like, oh my god, like and like he's pretty serious about it. So like a lot of people thought that was just kind of a thing that was surprising for somebody to say in a movie. and some people kind of call them out as being, kind of influencing the lawsuit and other things. But yeah, that was a weird part of the movie.
I mean,
that's a tonal change, a complete tonal change.
Yeah. Based on everything else that had happened before that, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to, question anyone's, concerns about their own mental health.
Yeah, I'm not doing that either. I'm just saying that, that was in the movie, the way that was kind of portrayed was against this backdrop of a lawsuit where the guy was basically, trying to not make the game not come out because he was asserting his legal right to it at the same time. And they don't show his side at all, and like I said, he's kind of just portrayed as this bad guy in the background. And it's just kind of surprising, that the movie kind of just took one side with it and ran with it and then kind of included that scene, because it does kind of feel like you're saying one of these guys is a bad guy when, depending on your view of it, both of them might have a little bit of a claim to the game itself.
Yeah. Okay. I know we're getting close to kind of the end. I was just thinking of some other, because we talked about Uwe Boll last time.
I'm good. We're talking about him again.
We don't need to talk about Uwe Boll again.
I was actually thinking that one of the other, I feel like a lot of video game adaptation. I mean, I don't know. Part of it's that I don't want to say that no one who makes good films is interested in them because I don't think that's really fair. I'm not really sure what exactly it is. Maybe it's because of the fact that most video games don't really lend themselves to conventional 90-minute storytelling, but then again, a lot of serials and comics and books don't, and those work out. I mean,
the Assassin's Creed movie had a lot of, star power and skill behind it. I mean, it wasn't exactly, I don't think they got maybe a good director for it, but I mean, star power wise and acting wise, they had a pretty stacked crew. And that movie just went nowhere, and I know Ubi very famously kind of exerted more control over it because they wanted it to be better than most video game movies. But man, I mean, and like I said on our last movie podcast or movie related game podcast, I think that the Assassin's Creed world is ripe for a movie. I mean, it's just an interesting world to me, and you have the whole globe at any period of time at your disposal. I
think it really pertains, or it's, to me, the more interesting story would be the one on the ship, on the
Black Flag.
Black Flag. Thank you. That one to me looks like the kind of thing that you would definitely make into a movie. It just has a whole cinematic look to it, and the story seemed more interesting to me than the original. I understand you probably have to start at the beginning so that I guess your audience.
Yeah, I don't think you need to. I think honestly, as far as I could understand, the Assassin's Creed movie basically was just it's set in the Assassin's Creed universe, but it's a different story.
Yeah, it's not the story. I mean, they're going after the Apple and they're taking on the Templars, but it's not necessarily.
It's not Altair.
It's not Altair, yeah, and it's not Ezio. So, I mean, it's there in the universe, but yeah, I mean, they had some freedom to kind of do with it. They introduced the concept of the Animus and the Assassins and the Templars, and they got the baseline in there, and I mean, you've got Fassbender and Marion Cotillard. Yeah, I mean, you got names in that movie, but the movie just kind of. It felt bored with itself. It didn't have any kind of, humor or lightness. It was very much like that kind of grim, dark, moody Nolan Batman feel to it, which I think didn't play well for Assassin's Creed, which is kind of goofy if you think about it.
I mean, Nolan was also not that gritty or grim. It's as much as he's sort of associated with that style. He's still a Batman who is probably the most mentally sound we've seen in a movie since Batman 66. He's it's a movie that has a lot. Those are movies that have a lot of time. I'm sorry, that's just really unimportant.
Yeah, no, but not necessarily Nolan totally, but that's the feel I got walking away. Was it was trying to take a very serious look at kind of what in reality is just a little bit silly, right? Batman's a little bit silly too, right? Yeah. I mean, if you get down to it, and so is Assassin's Creed. You're living your ancestors' memory through this machine, and it's
you get to have sex with your ancestor, and then you play as the fetal version of yourself.
So there's some stuff in there.
It's staring to the skid, right?
Yeah, but I think they could have, at least kind of made it a little bit lighter. It wasn't horrible, but man, that's the last time I'll ever say, yeah, this is our chance at a good video game movie, because man, that one let me down a lot.
I feel like saying it like that maybe not the best way to go about it, because I don't think we're going to find like a magic example of this one thing that switches the paradigm. What we're going to have are movie adaptations that are better and better. And,
well, but I mean, Marvel did. I mean, comic movies were a joke until Iron Man, right? I mean,
no, they weren't, because there was also Blade. The X-Men movies were popular.
Popular, yeah, but I don't think anybody was like getting, I don't think my mom would have went and saw Blade.
Well, I mean, people saw X-Men.
Yeah, true. But
a lot of people saw X-Men, and
I mean, I don't think you can discount the importance of the Raimi Spider-Man films and the X-Men trilogy in convincing people that comic book movies were viable.
And also
commercial blockbusters.
But video games
it's really
aren't even there yet. They're not even at like the X-Men Spider-Man stage yet. It's like, oh god, a video game movie is going to be awful. Like there's no optimism.
It's also worth noting that like we've had book adaptations in films forever. And certainly in comic adaptations, like we talked about the Raimi Spider-Mans, and those were big movies, as was the Burton Batman movie, as was the Superman movies. Those were huge. And like when the Superman movies came out, people were like, this is, how people talk about how like the Citizen Kane of video games or whatever, how like this is like the Superman movie came out and it was like, people were like, this is this glorious new age. And there were actually people who were talking about how we were going to see all of these great high class comic book adaptations, and they never happened. Over time, we got more of them, and we are continuing to get more of them. And I think with video games, it's just more of a matter about not finding that perfect one, and more about there just being more good movies and more movies that are interested in exploring either the worlds of specific video games or, probably more importantly, the mechanics of games. So I think Retribution does that. I think Inception does that. And I think that when we start to get more good video game movies, because I think there are a couple good video game movies, it'll be through that direction.
So what you're saying is that the video game adaptations need to find their Spider-Man 2 as opposed to their Dark Knight, where it needs to be Oscar worthy, just viable enough to where audiences don't look at it and say, it's a video game, as opposed to, watching the comic book movies from before, beyond, say, the Burton Batmans, where they would watch comic book movies and say, well, it's like the comic book, not with disdain, but it's like, it is what it is, as opposed to Spider-Man 2, where it came along and it was like, wow, you could have feeling and high drama and actually really great acting with essentially a popcorn flick.
Well,
because
everybody's looking for that right now.
But when Dark Knight comes around, and you have a movie that's not only based on a comic book, but is actually so well acted that it's Oscar worthy. So video games don't need to find that. They need to find the Spider-Man 2 and then build from there.
Yeah, that would be my thing. I think you need to kind of have it accepted and then bring it into, high art levels, because right now it's not there. Yeah, and I mean, I think comic books is a good example, but also if you think about some of the other like genres of movies now that people get into, it takes a while just for people to even accept that some of these movies are. It used to be, dramas were the only things that people even considered for awards and stuff, but I think you're seeing a lot more comedies and things like that start to get talked about in consideration.
It's actually kind of gone up and down. Like in the 50s, you had a lot of comedies that were actually given those consideration. I think a lot of it isn't just that there's a bias against them, even if there kind of is. It's just that there's a lot, I think in general, like there's not a lot of genuinely like, I think that there's some, but there's not as many comedies that are maybe emblematic of the best that films of that year have to offer. Like I think something like What We Do in the Shadows would be a great would have been a great like Oscar contender.
Me too.
Yeah.
I love that movie. It was not only funny, but it was actually kind of touching in certain parts. But it wasn't really looked at because it was just that vampire comedy, sideshow.
Oh yeah, no, and I think that's where you see the bias. But in general, like I'm thinking of the big comedy films that have been recent, and I'm like, do I think the Baywatch movie should be up for consideration?
Well, I mean, even past that, like,
Some might argue that.
but like, there's movies that can transcend kind of what they were going to be. Like, did you guys expect the 21 Jump Street movies to be awesome? You know,
Nope.
and then they were. And I think there's a chance that video game movies could do that. It's just they've got to make that first couple steps, and I don't know how, but
I think honestly,
I hope they figure it out.
They have to find their Sam Raimi.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
I mean, I've argued, that they've already had some genuinely good ones. I think a lot of it would just be like people who are willing to, I don't know, maybe try to step away from the obvious tropes and maybe kind of lean into exploring the concept of gaming, like exploring worlds. But I don't know.
And that's what.
Like, I think that's where, like, say, Retribution has a template in the way that, like, the Raimi Spider-Mans or the Salkin Supermans or the Burton Batman laid a template.
Well, I'm hoping that Duncan Jones can do that with the next Warcraft movie, honestly. He's the type of director who gets it. I really think that. And he is a good director. I think that he can take Warcraft and put it in a direction that, I don't know, I think actually on Twitter he released what his plans are or would have been for the sequel. I don't know if it's been announced yet. I'm assuming it is because, like we talked about China, but he's the kind of guy, I think, like the Sam Raimi, who gets what it's about, gets what the story is, and maybe if they relax their, the studio standards for what they want the movie to be, he can kind of do something interesting in that world.
Movie executives they like to ruin movies. They just do. They just like to ruin them. They think.
Well, I think the next logical step would be the Arthur story, right? Which, I mean, is kind of a very classical, tale of a fall from grace. You got a power struggle and lots of stuff in there. I think if he was to take that story and run with it, there'd be a room to tell a cool story. But who knows what with that kind of money, what the studio is going to expect from him. I guarantee it has a couple characters that are Chinese in it, though, no matter what.
Yeah, see, I think the approach they need to take is something similar to what Wolfman mentioned, which is you need to, if you want to make a video game adaptation, obviously you can't recreate the feeling of playing a video game exactly, but you sort of need to take some of that spirit. So in a video game that's focused on exploration, you need to imbue the film with that spirit of exploration. And I think that right now what directors are doing is just sort of lifting the plot details and then remixing them and making like a generic semi-blockbuster.
Or a giant.
Yeah, and what they really need to do is do something more like you could make a movie that's like Wreck-It Ralph but with an existing property.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping that Duncan Jones or one, not necessarily has to be him, but one of those types of directors can do. They can say, okay, well, here's the spirit of this game, and I'm going to make a movie on it that's not necessarily, the exact plot points in the exact order, but, gets the spirit of it correct.
It's probably a little late for it, but imagine if they could make a GTA Vice City movie.
Oh, man.
My big question about a GTA movie would be like, I almost feel like the interactive elements are the defining part. Like I'm not sure because like the whole thing and in a lot of ways, I think what makes GTA work is that all of the crazy stuff is almost like to the side where it's not like when you play a GTA game, it's really rare that like if you just follow the story, it's really rare that you do all the crazy things you can do in the game. That's just, it's not blocked off. So there's a sense, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like I'm not sure.
The crazy isn't, most of the crazy isn't concentrated in the main storyline. I mean, San Andreas aside, because that just goes wacky, and it comes back to, then they bring it, I'm spoiling a very old game now, but then they sort of make a meta commentary on it, like, you went off and did all this crazy shit, and you forgot about your roots, and they bring it all back full circle. But for the most part, GTA games, the main plot remains grounded in a relative sense. The main plot really isn't about, going around running over old ladies.
Yeah, it's about what's really oftentimes a generic, if sometimes really well told, crime story.
Yeah, if I was going to do it, I would kind of focus on like the heist part of GTA, the newest one, kind of like do kind of like a Michael Mann type feel with it, where, you got a lot of interesting characters who meet up in various ways and have to, pull a heist off. And maybe not make it about make it just about being rich, not
action drama. Is it an action drama, or is it going to be a comedy action type?
Comedy action. You got to go that way with GTA.
Like, what's that director from Kiss Kiss Bang Bang?
Shane Black.
Like if he was the one that was given the reins on a GTA movie, I would see that being
I think that's really the best way
you're going to Guy Ritchie return to form type movie.
Yeah, I mean that. So here's this character, here's the story. Guy Ritchie, go with it, and you probably end up getting a really kind of exciting, maybe not necessarily makes a whole lot of sense type movie, but it would be something watching.
Yeah, you could argue that like Snatch is almost like a GTA kind of film, especially like since GTA got its like the first GTA set in London. So
yeah, I can see that because before women get here.
I thought GTA 2 was in London, and GTA 1 had Vice City, San Andreas, and Liberty City.
Other way around. GTA 1 is in London.
Okay, cool.
GTA 2 is in the States.
Probably the one I'd be interested in doing is an animated Mario movie or something, but just because I'm kind of interested in... Because I feel like it's something where it seems really impossible, and I'm more interested in trying something that I think would be hard to adapt instead of something that I think would be easier to adapt, like Assassin's Creed.
I think with the Mario cartoon, I think you just have to sort of lean into the silliness of it. But, but not like... I don't think you need to go meta like Sonic Boom. I think that would be really
I don't think
irritating.
Mario works with meta. I think Mario works with earnestness.
Yeah, like the one exception being like Mario plus Rabbids, which has a lot of meta in it.
But that's also from the Rabbids stuff too.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine what Mario's going to sound like.
I mean, they just get Charles Martinet. I don't know.
Yeah, just an Italian stereotype.
Yeah, that's kind of that might be problematic.
I mean, I think that honestly, like I've been watching a lot of cartoons recently, and I honestly think that having characters who don't talk as much is often for the better, and I think that works fine with Mario because...
Just make it like WALL-E.
No, like not like that quiet. But I was thinking more like a weirdly lighthearted Samurai Jack. Where, like, Mario just doesn't talk. Almost.
Does all the talking. Luigi does all the talking.
Yeah.
Make it like a JRPG, where the protagonist just doesn't talk.
Yeah, like give him like a little sprite that flies around his shoulder and that tells all the jokes.
I actually think, in all honesty, if they ever do adapt Zelda, I don't want Link to talk. I actually would love to see them try to have a character emote without actually using like coherent, specific dialogue.
Like you don't want "Excuse me, princess" to come.
No, I don't want like the weird Cheers joking dialogue in the Legend of Zelda cartoon.
I was thinking Kappa had mentioned the property earlier, but I was thinking about movies or properties that already exist that aren't games at all. Like for example, The Dark Tower is what you brought up earlier. Mm-hmm. I was thinking that would make for an awesome game to me. I mean, if they developed it.
Yeah. Because
of all the different levels, maybe not necessarily follow the exact same storyline, but just change it, alter it for the game. But that would just, with all the levels, all the different areas you can go to, this open world type thing, it just seems like that would be an awesome video game to play.
I think that I think we talked about it I think once before, but man, it is hard to make a licensed game these days that people aren't automatically going to reject right out the bat. I mean, with a few exceptions like Butcher Bay and a couple other ones, licensed games almost always just maybe Lego being the exception. I don't know if I've got excited for a licensed game in a long time.
I don't know. I mean, I think because of the fact, like in the fifth and sixth generation, it worked a lot more easily. But once we started getting to the seventh, and especially past the seventh, like licensed game adaptations didn't work because I think it's harder for shovelware to really get as much of a foothold. Now that you have increasingly digital distribution and a lot of non-GameStop used game stores have kind of like closed down. So I think,
and you've got a lot of like the real big licenses like Star Wars tied up in one, place.
Company.
Yeah. It's not like it used to be where you could put out that weird Star Wars Connect game or whatever. You put Star Wars on, it's got to run through EA, and EA is going to figure out how to get the most money out of that thing they can.
So I don't think like adaptations are necessarily something I assume are just going to turn out bad. A lot of times I'm not as interested in them just because I think it's just because I like to hear about a game before when it comes out usually more than anything else.
I'd love a Dark Tower game though. Back to what you're talking, I would love it.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, Matrix. I mean, any types of those movies where even like Inception, movies that feel like they could be video games are always exciting to me. But I mean, you got to have the right studio doing the right thing with it. But man, yeah, Dark Tower would be really cool. Thinking about like as like a Fallout style RPG or something.
You know what I'm going to go say, and this is going to be really crazy and ambitious, and no studio could reasonably do it. The Wire adaptation.
Oh man.
like basically something like LA Noire, but where you can actually genuinely screw up and fail missions, or when like missions kind of lead into each other, and so you basically create a story where you go through these different investigations over time, and how you solve them actually influences what happens in the later season. So if you try to
so definitely like a Telltale Chapter game style.
A bit, but it would have to have a lot more. It would have to have more branching paths, or at least more distinguishing during the paths, because, like, if, say, for instance, if you tried to be acted like an abusive cop to try to get results, maybe then that you get harangued by the DEA, or the criminals start to adapt to not have to deal with that, so you have to find new methods.
Or what Bunny Colvin does, so you do the opposite as opposed to being the bad kind of cop, or trying to be the more violent, pushy cop, trying to actually introduce something more positive into the system, like Bunny. And if I'm giving away or spoiling season 3, I'm sorry. But, the whole Amsterdam thing, obviously will have some drawbacks as well.
And of course the problem with that is that you'd have to make, for one thing, probably a sandbox. Which is not cool because this wouldn't be a game that would use sandbox as well. So, but you'd still have to have a large, massive cast of characters and situations, and then it just would be financially exorbitant to a degree.
The hard thing about it too is, for whatever reason, I don't agree with it. Just true. Video games are held to a weirder standard when it comes to adult things than movies. Like if you ever try to make Breaking Bad the game, people would lose their mind. Do you know what I mean? Like if you were making meth to make money.
Totally agree.
I always kind of think about that. Like if you try to make a Wire game and you made it profitable to be a drug dealer and made it look cool, and killing people actually helped you in the game, people would lose their minds just because it's viewed as a kid's thing still in some ways.
I mean, sometimes, but I'm not entirely as sure about that. I mean, I think in general, people do. I think they see it more as juvenile than for kids by this point, because the vast majority of games are very clearly marketed to and meant for adult audiences, or at least chronologically adult audiences.
Yeah. I could see that. I would be worried about any kind of adaptation like that. Would just be, I mean, if you didn't play it for, indie cred, I don't think any, like you said, any major studio would take that chance, because, man.
I think there's, this is a little bit hard to explain. I might stumble when I'm trying to get at. I understand why people are sensitive about gaming's ability to depict serious and controversial issues, because they fucked up in the past.
Yeah. Yes.
But
there's no reason
that
to keep
being
trying.
Said, there's almost this weird reactionary mindset amongst some members of what's called the gaming intelligentsia, who believe that there's something, or I don't know if they truly believe this, but they act as if any attempt to do so, or to depict these difficult issues, is doomed to failure, and therefore shouldn't be attempted in the first place.
That's the thing though, is and I know you and I and probably Kappa and Pumpkin Pie would disagree with this, because I was thinking about this earlier. I mentioned Ace Attorney before, and if because Ace Attorney has this weird cultural thing where it's a Japanese game and it takes place in Japan, and the English version, it takes place in LA. to get it. Well, no, it also makes sense because the Ace Attorney is also like a Japanese adaptation of stuff like Columbo and Perry Mason, so it's all kind of fits. But in one thing that doesn't really cross over, and by necessity, is the fact that the Ace Attorney games are kind of a satire and criticism of the actual Japanese legal system. Because in Japan, the court system often puts more of the burden of proof on the innocent, and they structure a system where, like, it's actually the prosecutors who have the most kind of commercial and political power. So Phoenix is a defense attorney and defending, like, innocent clients in a world where yeah. Do you know? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it is very much this like Ace Attorney is very much this sort of I don't want to say critique, but it's a depiction of the very specific attitudes and characteristics of the Japanese legal system. It's also something that was a big subject of criticism in Persona 5, right? That they that's a story about somebody who's unjustly treated by a legal system that's geared towards prosecuting the accused. So it's something that doesn't translate as well over to say the American legal system.
It probably doesn't really translate to American audiences either. I don't think they would actually. They might go above them. I mean, not to. Well, no, I totally say about American audiences, we're not that smart. We're just not.
I mean, I don't think a lot of audiences are that smart, really.
Yeah, it's cultural differences make it sometimes a little difficult to adapt these things across countries. So I think that's all the time we have for this podcast. Thank you guys for being on it and chat with us about depicting video games and other media, how we'd adapt video games to movies, and of course, talking about our favorite topic ever, Sonic the Hedgehog.
And his enduring terribleness.
Yeah. So, anything else you guys like to add before we call this to a close?
Nah, I had a great time, man.
Yeah, this was a good one. So, thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you next time, listeners. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.